The purpose of getting a patch bay is to essentially use multiple different pieces of equipment and have all of the connections to that equipment in one centralized area. Andrew Masters here, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about studio patch bays, how you use them, how they work, how to set one up if you're using one for the purpose of recording in your studio, whether it's project, commercial, or home studio. In this video, we'll go over a couple different types of patch bays, different ways you can connect to them, and the basic functionality of how you use it, how to set it up, and why it works the way that it does. I'll try and cram as much as I can in this video. I'm gonna introduce you to our new studio intern, Nico, and we'll have a little back and forth on patch bays. We're gonna do a giveaway for 2 different patch bays. If you wanna learn more about patch bays, I will link my patch bay course down in the description. Go check that out, and let's get into it. So for the sake of keeping this video brief and focused, we're gonna cover 2 different types of patch bays. The first is extremely common when you're just starting to collect gear for your studio, home studio, sometimes project studios. The 1/4-inch patch bay. Then we're also going to cover a TT patch bay that has DB25 connectors, and we'll get more into that soon. The main difference between these 2 patch bays is going to be the number of patch points on the patch bay, meaning the connections that you can make and the amount of equipment you could connect to it. So the 1/4-inch patch bay is going to have exactly half as many connections as a TT patch bay. TT stands for tiny telephone. So here's a TT cable. You can see this is an extremely small cable. It just allows for you to make far more connections in the same real estate. The 1/4-inch connection is on this cable. So as you can see, quite a substantial difference in the size cable and therefore connection, which just means you can't fit as many in that same space. So I've got 2 patch bays here, a 1/4-inch patch bay and a TT patch bay. We're gonna open them up, check them out, and I'll show you what the connections look like on the front and on the back. All right, so I'm joined here with my friend Nico. Nico, thank you for coming by and doing this. He's helping me here in the studio. What do you know about patch bays, and what don't you know about patch bays?
Right, so I kind of know what they do, what their general purpose is, but I'm not super confident in using one in a session situation or kind of the inner workings of how they work.
What is the purpose of using the patch bay from your understanding?
From my understanding, you can send audio signals from one, maybe outboard effects unit to something else, or maybe you send the audio from a synth to maybe a compressor or to the computer, just sending audio. Okay, so essentially you're connecting different devices together through this patch bay. Now you also said that you have a patch bay back home that you and your dad use? Yeah, at my home studio, yeah.
And you said that's a 1/4-inch patch bay?
1/4-inch patch bay, yeah.
Okay, so again, the 1/4-inch is gonna be, well, let's just open them up. I got 2 here. This one is the 1/4-inch patch bay. The main difference between 1/4-inch patch bay and a TT patch bay, outside of you're gonna get 48 points, 24 on the top row and 24 on the bottom on a 1/4-inch, and 48 on the top and 48 on the bottom with the TT, is cost. But you can get a 1/4-inch patch bay for about $200, and a TT patch bay is going to vary in price depending on which brand you get and the functionality and what it looks like and build quality and stuff like that. So this is the Black Lion Audio 1/4-inch. It's called the PBR-TRS3, but this is what it looks like. I'll see if I can hide my face and maybe we can get a good focus on it here. So this is our 1/4-inch patch bay. The front looks exactly like this. There's enough space on here to actually put some labels. The labeling is going to be the saving grace for operating and using a patch bay and knowing what the hell is going on your patch bay. All of the connections are on the back So get some labels for your patch bay first, come up with a good plan for how you want to label it. There's a company here in Nashville called Trace Audio, and they make custom patch bay labels that you can buy for your 1/4" patch bay, and they have a label designer. I'll put a link to that down under this video as well. Now on the back, it looks fairly similar to the front here. You have all the same connections. That's what's unique about the 1/4" is the front connections are the same exact cable as the rear connections. The purpose of getting a patch bay is to essentially use multiple different pieces of equipment and have all of the connections to that equipment in one centralized area. You had mentioned mic lines. How would you explain mic lines? Like, what is a mic line?
I'm not entirely sure, I'm gonna be honest.
Okay, so a mic line, this is really common in studios. This phrase, mic lines, it's just your microphones. So your microphones that you're using on whatever it is, an acoustic guitar or vocal, are an XLR cable, and usually you plug those into something to record them. A mic line is the path that you're plugging your microphones into. So it's essentially just an extension of your microphone cable that converts with an adapter to whatever these connections are. So these are 1/4", so I would have to have like an XLR to 1/4" snake, which is like just another thing that we have to buy. The mic line just means that your microphones are gonna show up wherever it is you have them connected on your patch bay. When you set up a patch bay, generally what we do is we use outputs over inputs. What does that mean? In signal flow, everything is an output to an input. If you're singing, your voice is your output. You're outputting your voice to the input of a microphone, right? Then it comes out of that microphone, XLR, to the patch bay of your mic line here. So your top row, if you're recording, is gonna be your microphone lines, but it's an output. It's the output from your microphone. So then underneath it, if you're going outputs to inputs, whatever's underneath that is gonna be the input that you want the microphone to go to. Now for the 1/4", let's just imagine that it's an audio interface. Let's say I have an 8-channel audio interface and I have 8 mics set up. What I would do is I would have my first 8 channels come in for my mic lines on the top row, and then right underneath it, I would have the inputs to my audio interface. So essentially when I plug a microphone in to my mic line, if it's on channel 1, it's gonna go through your patch bay down into microphone input 1 of your audio interface. The flow is microphone output to audio interface input. Now let's say you have some outboard gear. Let's just use a compressor as an example. So what I would do is I would select a section of the patch bay for outboard equipment. The value of this is in the function called normaling. Are you familiar with normaling?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I'm not quite sure what it is though.
Essentially, there's a path between your top row and your bottom row. The patch bay normaling setting will dictate what this behavior is between the top and the bottom. So there are 3 different categories of normaling that you would use. The first one is called full normal. If I have this patch bay set to full normaling, then that path from my microphone is gonna automatically connect to the input of the interface. I don't actually have to use a patch cable. It's just gonna default go there. Now, if it's set to full normal and you have no patch cable in it, it's gonna default flow through. But let's say you wanna use a compressor, you're gonna have to patch, right? So here's what happens with the normaling. If you patch into it, it's no longer flowing down to here. So that's the main feature of a full normal. If you are not connected to it, it will flow down into the next row by default. But if you patch into it, you will break that normal. And where's your signal at now? It's right here. So we're gonna go into our compressor. Now our signal is in the compressor. It is not flowing down. We will come out of the compressor into our audio interface input. So it sort of makes the journey in this one small spot with these 2 cables, instead of you actually plugging your mic into the preamp or whatever. Obviously you'd have to hit a preamp before you use a compressor. That's full normaling. If you patch into it, you break that normal, and if you don't patch anything, it will flow through. The next category is called a half normal. You're gonna use this less often. A half normal is similar to a full normal where it's going to, by default, flow through, right? So microphone input by default with no patch. But if it's half normal and you make that patch into it, your signal is here, right? But it's also still flowing down. So it's in two places now. So a half normal, you can actually patch into it and send it somewhere else, but it's still gonna flow down to that original source. You can think of a lot of different ways this can be valuable. You know, let's say it's a synthesizer on the top row input and then the bottom row is your audio interface input. You can take this signal and run into, let's say, a guitar pedal. So you can put some effects on it and then come out of the effects and send that to a different input. So now you have two signals of your synth, dry signal of the synth going into your input, but then you have a copy of it going to your effect, and then out of that effect going to another input. So now you have two signals coming from one line. So the half normal can be used to essentially take a copy of that signal, which is very valuable, but it gets tricky with, let's say these were microphone preamps here, like you had some outboard pre's that you want to use. If your mic pre's, your outboard preamps set to half normal, what's going to happen is your outputs of your preamp are going to cycle back into the inputs of the preamp, and it's going to cause it to feed back, which you don't want. Which brings us to our third setting, which is called non-normaling. So a non-normal just means that the signal does not flow from top to bottom. You have to patch it. The reason why you would do non-normal is that scenario. If you have some outboard mic pre's and you only have one patch bay, you don't want that to connect at all. So you want to actually choose to go into it, and the only way you get signal in or out is by patching. That's the non-normal. So again, the three different ways are full normal, half normal, and non-normal. Full normal, your signal flows from the top to the bottom unless you patch in, then you will break the normal. Half normal, it's going to flow from the top to the bottom even if you patch in, so you can take a duplicate of the signal. And then non-normal means you have to patch. If you want it to go from the top to the bottom, you got to make that patch. There's a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different possibilities of ways that you can use it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the basics of normaling. If you have any questions, let us know down in the comments. If you're asking, how do I choose to have this be a full normal or a half normal, the switches are on the back. Now you'll notice if you look at this, it says normal or norm. The middle setting is through, and then the other setting is half. So norm is full normal, half is half normal, through is non-normal. And you can just select a custom setting for each connection. Do you have any questions about this 1/4 inch?
No, that all makes sense.
Okay, you can get in and out, 1/4 inch on the back. You can buy snakes. A snake is gonna have anywhere between 2 to 4 to 8 channels, and it'll break out to 8, so that way you can have 3 snakes connect to your whole top row here with 8 channels per snake. And that just helps keep things nice and tidy. Next, I wanna show you briefly the patch bays that I use, which are TT patch bays. As you can see, there are twice as many connections here. You have 24 is right up to the middle patch bay, and then you have another 24 on both top and bottom. So you have 96 connections that you can make to the same amount of real estate. One single rack space here, 96 patch points. The difference between this one and the 1/4 inch, outside of the size of the connections and the number of the connections, is how you get into it from the rear. So the back, the connections look totally different. So these are what are called DB25 connections or D-sub connections. So the only way you can get into this is with a DB25 connector. One of the questions I get asked is, how do you plug your mics into the patch bay? I use a stage box, which is just a long XLR snake. So on the other side of that snake is 16 female XLRs. Obviously, I can't plug female XLRs into this, so I have to get an adapter. So let me show you the adapter that I use. Okay, so here we have a DB25 to XLR snake. Okay, so that's our DB25 connection at the end of the cable, and this is gonna plug directly in to the back of our TT patch bay. So we've got 8 channels per DB25, and you have 48 across. So we have 6 different DB25s on the top row and the bottom row. So that's a lot of connections. 96 is a lot. But if you have a lot of gear, or you want to have a lot of gear and you don't want to have a lot of racks in your studio, then this is really great for that, because this consolidates how much rack space you're gonna have to use, because you would literally have to use twice as much rack space and bigger cables, bigger snakes with a 1/4-inch patch bay. Now again, the difference is also gonna be in the price point, so this is gonna cost a bit more than the 1/4-inch. I'll put links to these down in the description if you wanna see, and also we're gonna give away both of these patch bays. But that's the main difference, is your rear connections are DB25s, so you will have to, instead of getting, let's say, an XLR to 1/4-inch snake, you would get an XLR to DB25 snake. Again, I'm gonna put a link to Trace Audio, who has custom patch bay labelers. If you are trying to figure out putting labels on your patch bays, you can check that out down in the description. We're gonna do a giveaway for both this TT patch bay from Black Lion Audio as well as the 1/4-inch TRS patch bay. We'll give both of them away. I'll probably pick an individual winner for each. Check the link for the giveaway down in the description. Yeah, let us know if you have any comments down below. Leave a subscribe, a like. There's a bunch of different ways that you can use patch bays depending on if you're trying to record or mix. I wanted to kind of cover just some super fundamental ways if you are setting up your first patch bay for the purpose of recording. If you just dumb it down, are just microphone outputs to your interface inputs, and then maybe if you have some outboard microphone preamps, you can run that on a bank to the side of your patch bay, and now you know how to utilize the normaling for whether you want it to go from top row to the bottom row in a fully normal situation, or you want to have some outboard pre's and you want to keep that in a non-normaling setting. You now know how to do that. So if you have any other questions about using it for recording, let me know. We'll probably do another video on setting one up for the purposes of mixing, if you're trying to do more mixing using outboard equipment and you want to use a patch bay. We'll do a more focused video on that, because there's a lot of different ways that you can use a patch bay for that setup. Again, if you want to dive deeper on patch bays, there's a link to my patch bay course down in the description, the giveaway, as well as links to these. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.